Introducing our host, Fred Swaniker, in conversation with iconic global leaders. Welcome to The Pathway.
Greetings. My name is Fred Swaniker, and I'm the founder of The Room. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to The Pathway. As Room members, you're the world's most ambitious doers, the innovators, disruptors, entrepreneurs, and leaders who will shape the world. And here in The Room, we challenge you to do more with the opportunities and skills that you have, and to solve the world's toughest problems. This conversation series, The Pathway, aims to demystify the path to success. We will uncover the milestones, failures, relationships, and untold serendipity that has enabled the trajectory of some of the world's greatest leaders. And our hope is that it will give you some insight to help you craft your own journey of impact. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our guest tonight, Don Gips. Don is the CEO of the Skoll Foundation, where he invests in, connects, and celebrates social entrepreneurs around the world. More recently, he led Albright Stonebridge Group's Africa practice, consulting with companies, entrepreneurs, and foundations who are investing across the African continent. And before that, he served as Director of Presidential Personnel in the Obama White House, ushering in the most diverse administration in US history. He also served as US Ambassador to South Africa, where he managed over 1,000 staff and a budget of over 600 million across multiple government agencies. Now, one piece of trivia about Don that you might not know is that President Obama asked him to review the manuscript for his first book, The Audacity of Hope. But before working for President Obama, Don served as a Chief Domestic Policy Advisor for Vice President Al Gore. And before all that, before he got involved in politics, he also had a stint at McKinsey. He started out, early on out of college, working in Sri Lanka, where on a Rockefeller Fellowship, he helped install water wells and even managed a refugee camp. Don received an MBA from the Yale School of Management and his undergraduate degree from Harvard University. He's married to a beautiful, wonderful woman who I know very well, Liz Gips. I can tell you that Don definitely lucked out in that department. And the couple have 3 grown sons. Don, welcome to The Pathway.
Thank you, Fred. It's great to be here.
Now, Don, you're one of the most outgoing, friendliest people that I know, with that incredible memory for those that you've met. Whenever I sit with you, one of the things I really enjoy is, I talk to you about one of my projects, and you immediately start throwing out names, saying, "Oh, you should talk to this person, you should talk to that person," and then next thing I know, I look in my inbox, and you've sent me a bunch of emails connecting me to folks. So it's no wonder you were so successful in your role as the U.S. Ambassador to South Africa. It seems like it just comes naturally to you. So my first question to you, Don, is: were you born this way? If I had met you in elementary school or high school, would you have been that popular kid that everyone knew, or that knew everyone? And were you one of the first people to get a Rolodex when we used to use those things? Just have you always been this way? Just let us know how you became to be who you are.
Yeah, I think I always have. Although I don't know if I was always that popular. I just like you said, I married up. I had a mom that all my friends wanted to come hang out at my house because it was a nice place to hang out. So, yeah, I've always been extroverted, and my mom said about me very early on that I was a little bit like Tom Sawyer, who always figured out how to get somebody else to paint the fence. I'm a little bit lazy, so I always tried to have people around me who were better at things than I was and could make the world go a little bit smoother.
Okay, so obviously you spent a lot of time in the previous administration before President Trump with Barack Obama, tell us, how did you meet the former President Barack Obama and eventually join his team? Tell us the story, how that happened.
Yeah, I had, as you mentioned in the intro, had worked in the Clinton administration as domestic policy advisor to Vice President Gore, and really had fled Washington as a way of really focusing on raising our family, and we'd moved to Colorado, and I'd pretty much left politics behind. And I was also partially, we'd been through Monica Lewinsky and other things, and I was semi-disillusioned by politics. And then a friend of mine called me up and said, "Oh, you really ought to listen to the Democratic National Convention speech on Thursday night." So I got my family and we sat around the TV watching, and I cried the whole time when this skinny guy with big ears gave this incredible speech that really was the vision of America that I believed in and was incredibly inspired by. So I immediately, after the speech, started emailing all my friends and saying, "Jenny, you guys know him, and is he for real?" And one of my friends emailed me back and said, "Yes, he's for real, and he's even better than that speech." And so I asked the friend for his email, and he wrote back and said, "You and every other Democrat in America." And the friend said, I finally convinced the friend to give me the email. I was doing some work to help a guy by the name of Ken Salazar, who was running for Senate in Colorado. And I sent, then he was still not even a senator at that point. I sent him an email to Barack Obama and said, "I'm helping Ken Salazar. It'd be great to get you out to Colorado if you would come help contribute to the election." Expecting not to get a response, I immediately got one, and it was Senator Obama himself, or then State Senator Obama, responding and saying, "I would love to help Ken, and the more time I'm ahead in my race, and Ken's is the most competitive race." So we arranged for him to come out, and I had a then State Senator Obama was such a rock star that he was starting his day in Washington, doing 2 events in California, then flying to Colorado, and then we'd go back to Chicago that night where he was from. And we met him at the airport, took him to do the event. And then I had to work for a company that had a plane at the time, and I was flying the plane back to New York. So I said, "We'll take you to Chicago." So he and I got on the plane and had this long day, and I said, "Please feel free to rest." But he immediately started asking me all sorts of questions about myself. For the whole 2-hour flight, we engaged in a conversation, and I was just incredibly impressed by him. And when we landed, the pilots came back and said, "We have a flat tire, but so it's going to take a couple hours." It's 11 at night. He stayed in the hangar with me while they changed the tire and kept talking. And then at the end of the conversation, I said, "Look, if there's ever anything I can do to help you, I'm glad to do it." And I gave him my business card, never expecting to hear from him to help raise money, which is when in the US, when you give a politician your business card, they generally expect you to raise money for them. But I got a call from him the next day saying, "Hey, if I win my election, I'm going to need to hire a staff for the US Senate. I don't know many people in Washington. Would you help me hire that staff?" And that's what began our relationship.
Wow. So again, serendipitous meeting, and it led to something much, much bigger. You talked earlier about how you've always been an extrovert, and you've enjoyed building relationships. What is the craziest unexpected outcome that has come from your openness to building relationships?
So there's been so many. It's one of the great joys of my life to watch people, to help people and watch them go on to do amazing things. And those quite often rebound back to me in unexpected ways. Probably the best example I can think of off is a good, well, my arch rival in high school, we played sports against each other, reached out to me one day and said, "Hey, I'm organizing a March for Hunger. Would you help?" That march led to, we became friends. We went to university together. We organized community service events at our university. I ended up writing my thesis on the history of community service. Uh, Almost 10 years later, I'm at McKinsey and had actually taken the first paternity leave ever at McKinsey because our son had some issues at birth. And I was home and watching him, and I got a call from a retired McKinsey partner saying, "Your friend Wayne says you know everything there is about community service. Would you be willing to help us write a report on how to set up a national service program in the United States?" And Wayne was a commissioner, for a commission that our Congress had set up. And he said, "You can do it from home. I know you need to be at home." And so I helped write this report that led to Bill Clinton looking at it and adopting it as part of his campaign, and then helping to set up AmeriCorps, which was our national service program and something I was involved in from the beginning. And it was probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. And it just led all the way back to that March for Hunger back in high school.
Wow. Incredible story about how something you decided to do with you call him your arch rival in high school, and taking a chance and investing in that relationship, continued through university and ultimately defined one of the big turning points in your career, and also actually also impacted the nation. AmeriCorps is a huge program that really gets millions of young people to volunteer for public service in the U.S. every year, and that came out of that chance encounter, or that relationship that you started.
And hopefully it'll get bigger with the Biden administration.
Yes. Well, speaking about Joe Biden, I recall meeting him at a reception that you hosted for him when he visited South Africa while you were U.S. ambassador. And I remember thinking, I had a brief conversation with him. I remember after I left my interaction, I said, "Wow, what a nice guy," And this was about 8 or 9 years ago. So, aside from hopefully an expansion in AmeriCorps, what can the world expect from a Biden presidency?
After the last 4 years, normalcy. He's going to return to the values and ethics, and as he said, he's going to restore the soul of America. That's his goal. And in our country, which sadly is very divided today, I can't think of anyone better positioned to try and navigate those divides and unite people, because what your interaction with him was symbolic of every interaction he has. He is one of the most genuine, empathetic people I've ever met. There were times when I was working in the White House. I remember when you work in the White House, you can give late night tours after everybody has theoretically left the White House. And I was taking a family on a tour, and we were walking down the hallway, and we ran into Vice President Biden, and he said, "Hey, Don, how are you doing? And who do you have with you?" And I introduced the family, and it was a mother and father, their kids, and the grandmother. And he said, "Well, can I show them my office?" And I'm like, "Yes." And so we go into the vice president's office. He sits down and he chats with them for 35 minutes. This was like 10:30 at night. It was just who he is. He is a true people person who has this incredible knowledge, not only of the U.S. and all the various sides of our country, but of the world. When I was head of presidential personnel, it was very funny. We had to pick all the ambassadors, and as we were going around and trying to decide who should go where, not only could he talk about that country and what the right fit might be, but he could tell you what the ambassador's house looked like because he'd been to all of them, because he'd traveled the world. So you're getting somebody who not only understands the U.S. but understands the world, and hopefully can restore America. We're a country that has an incredible vision and in its founding that inspires people around the world, and quite often, and certainly for the last 4 years, we don't live up to that vision. And Vice President Biden is the type of person who will try and restore that.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, so in your prediction, what he said is he's going to restore the soul of America. But what you're also saying is that he's a people person. He generally cares about individuals. He knows, it makes time for people to get to know folks, and hopefully that can help to heal both, America and also America's relationships with the rest of the world.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to that moment because, I think the rest of the world has been watching with amazement as what has been going on in the U.S.
By the way, he just did a call with President Ramaphosa this week, talking about the importance of Africa and rebuilding relationships with the continent. So Africa is also on his agenda.
That's good to know. That's very good to know. So, one of the things that President Biden or President-elect Biden has to do now is to build his entire new team, right, in the White House. And I know you did that for President Obama when he became president. So can you describe, how many people need to be hired to staff up a new presidency, and how does that whole process work?
Yeah, so there are about 4,000 political appointments. So, there's the career civil service, which is the bulk of government employees. And then there's about 4,000 political appointments that a new administration gets to make. And of those, about 1,000 are Senate confirmed. So there are positions that assistant secretary, undersecretary, cabinet secretary that have to go through Senate confirmation. The rest are everything from the White House staff to, chiefs of staff, speechwriters, et cetera, that are more political in our structure. And, when I took over for President Obama, for those 4,000 jobs on the day I walked in, we had over 400,000 people applying. So it's really this incredible sifting process. And when I started in that role, one of the things I did was reach out to all my predecessors to get their advice on how to do the job. And President Bush's predecessor, when I talked to him, he said, have you figured out how to describe this role yet? And I said, well, I think so, but how do you describe it? And his response said, I'm in charge of disappointments. President Bush, he's in charge of appointments. So a lot of what has to happen is you've got to tell a lot of people no who want these jobs. It was actually one of the best lessons in my life on being honest with people, and being partially because their time was so important, but also you're holding people's lives in your hand, and giving them honest feedback and helping them figure out what they're suited for, what they're not suited for, really, rather than stringing people along, giving them direct feedback. It was an incredible lesson in that. And we were moving quickly. The Biden administration has an additional challenge in that we'll see what happens in Georgia, but there's a decent chance that we'll have divided government where the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. And that, for Senate confirmation, that will make it very difficult for, certain people that President Biden might want to be selected. So you've got to factor that in to the whole selection process. And Vice President Biden, very similar to President Obama, has made a commitment to bringing in an administration that looks like America. And so it's sort of a Rubik's Cube. You're trying to put together the right qualities, diversity. Can you get them Senate confirmed? And in a situation where the country's at the level crisis between the pandemic and the economy that we're in right now, how do you do that quickly so that you can get your administration up and operating and start delivering for the American people? It's a
And
big
how long
job.
does the president typically have to assemble this team of almost 4,000 people?
Well, we were proud of how fast we did it, and that was partially motivated because I couldn't go to South Africa until I'd gotten 70% of the people selected. But there's no rule on that, and there are many jobs that President Trump never filled because he didn't really believe in the importance of government, and certainly not the cabinet agencies. I think Vice President Biden, and I've talked to or President-elect Biden, and I've talked to some of the people who are doing this for him. They are committed to filling that incredibly quickly so that people can get to work and really fill all these roles. I think the challenge will be how fast the Senate's willing to confirm, and will they move at the speed they need to. President-elect Biden said the other day, it's very true, every day that's lost in this process is actually going to affect lives, particularly when we're in the middle of this pandemic. And so how we speed up this transition is essential.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a very good point. And right now, the world, President Trump is unwilling to concede the election. And, you just talked about how President Biden is ready to go. He wants to put his team together because right now lives are at stake. And the U.S., the pandemic is raging. Aside from, the pandemic response, what other risks right now does the U.S. face due to, President Trump's unwillingness to concede the election and initiate the transition?
Well, there's some immediate risks that are that you can almost calculate. So coming back to the pandemic briefly, we're so blessed to have, it looks like 2 vaccines and probably more coming that will be effective against the virus. But they're the distribution of these vaccines. A vaccine is only as good as is no good unless it's actually being used and people are being vaccinated. In developing the strategies for how you're going to do that, the distribution of that, it's the largest vaccination program in the history of our country and in the world. And every day that you lose in figuring out how to do that will actually lead to lives lost. And at least to this point, the Trump administration has not been sharing the distribution plans with the Biden administration. So that's one aspect of it. The other big challenge is really around international and national security. How do you start, every day that we can lose in terms of rebuilding our relationships globally. And, as I said, President Biden took the call from President Ramaphosa, but normally those calls are all done through the State Department. So President Ramaphosa's ambassador here would reach out to the State Department and say, I'd like to talk to President Biden. The State Department would organize it. They'd brief President-elect Biden. None of that happened. So President Ramaphosa was looking around for staff numbers that he could set up to call President Biden or say that he wanted to call it. It slowed everything down. And it's just a real tangible example of, how challenging this can be if you don't have the mechanisms of government behind you. Having said all that, and then the biggest threat, which hopefully no one will never come to fruition, is does some foreign adversary or terrorist group decide that this is the moment to do something because we have divided government. And then the last threat, and it's very significant, is how this is dividing our country. It's making that reuniting that President Biden is hoping to do much more difficult because President Trump is stoking the divisions within our country and trying to say that President-elect Biden was not legitimately elected.
Mm-hmm. You know, and here in Africa, we think we've got problems with democracy, and you know,
yeah, we're
rigged elections, etc.
The parallels are a little frightening these days.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to just remind the folks on the, you know, who are with us in our virtual room that we'll soon be going to questions. So please type in your questions in the chat, and you know, we'll have a chance to ask Don some of those questions shortly. You know, now, so it sounds like, you know, there's some real serious risks here, and you know, yeah, hopefully this transition will eventually go smooth. I can just imagine President Ramaphosa texting people saying, you know, do you have a connection? Do you have a number for for Biden so I can call him and congratulate him? So Don, you know, how would you describe your life's mission right now, and how does your work at the Skoll Foundation fit into that?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I've always loved doing is supporting great change leaders who are trying to make a difference in the world, and that includes you, by the way. I find people who are willing to challenge and think of new ways to reshape society for the better are incredibly inspiring to me, and being able to support them on that journey is incredibly inspiring. That's what was, you know, my service in the Obama administration, working with Al Gore, AmeriCorps. They were all about building, helping others build to a better future. And that is exactly what we try to do at Skoll. Jeff Skoll, who's the founder, for those of you who don't know, was one of the founders of eBay. And you know, if you think about eBay, it's a platform for small businesses to reach consumers. And Jeff took that sort of vision and said, how do you apply that to really trying to make society better? And he created 3 organizations. Participant, which is a production studio that, you know, has produced everything from The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, about one of ALA's grads, to last year 2 years ago, they did Roma, Green Book, they won the Academy Award, RBG, and On the Basis of Sex. So incredible social impact movies, and it's really a platform for artists who want to use the power of narrative to drive social change. He created Capricorn, which is an impact investing arm focused on helping business entrepreneurs who want to change the world and for the better. And he created the Skoll Foundation to invest and connect and champion in social entrepreneurs, people who have a vision for how to improve society. And right now we're dedicated to funding, connecting, and championing those transformational social change leaders who really are trying to drive change in any number of areas to make the world a better place. So I can't think of a better sort of last place to end my career than the Skoll Foundation, where I get to support people. It really is sort of the fulfillment of all the things I've built on through my career.
So yeah, you're really passionate about enabling and accelerating the career of folks who are trying to, you know, make an impact in the world. And now you've got to, you don't have to do that as a side gig. You know, it's really your day-to-day role now in the Skoll Foundation.
Exactly, and that big Rolodex you talked about before, I get to use on behalf of all these great change leaders, and you know, every day I come to work, I'm inspired by the work that they're doing around the world.
Excellent. Well, wonderful place to, like you say, to spend your, let's call it the next chapter of your career. I wouldn't say the last chapter of your career. You know, we never know where things
Thank you, Fred. Thank you.
Speaking about, relationships and leveraging your Rolodex to support others, etc. Here in the room, we have the notion of a pathfinder. A pathfinder serves as an ambassador, a connector, an advocate for members of the room, helping to connect them members to opportunities that help to further their mission in life. So think of it almost like your very own Jerry Maguire, right? Who's working with members of the room to help them achieve their missions. So if you look back on this really illustrious and very diverse, career that you've had, who has been your greatest pathfinder? Someone that has really opened doors for you and just accelerated, your impact and your career.
Yeah, I've been blessed. First of all, I think it's a hugely important thing you're doing, and the Jerry Maguire, as I think about it. I actually had a friend who did this for me named Dan Dutko, who really was he was involved in democratic politics. But he actually passed away. He died in a bicycling accident, and at his funeral, both Vice President Gore and President Clinton spoke, and they talked about him. It's very similar to the concept you have, as a gardener who really spent his career trying to help people grow by providing them the water and the fertilizer that they needed to grow to the level that where they would reach their full potential. And he did that for me. He's how I ended up in the White House the first time. He was always there as somebody who found real joy in inspiring other people to realize their potential. And I try to model myself after him, because I think it's one of the, I said this earlier, I think it really does give you a different type of satisfaction to feel like you've helped somebody on their way by, making that connection and thinking about how that person can make how you can make a difference in that person's life, but also help the organization that they're going to by exposing them to great talent. And so I try to do that every day in my life, and I think it's a great thing that the room is trying to do that and create these pathways for people.
That's a great story, Don. And you've been one of my great pathfinders. I mean, the amount of doors that you've opened for me and the people you've introduced me to. You were the one who arranged for me to go to the White House for the first time in 2010 to meet President Obama as part of the first ever Young African Leaders Initiative gathering with him, and when he came to South Africa, and so many amazing things that have happened because in my life personally, because you opened the door for me. So I'm very grateful to you for that. And in case you're thinking about future career options, the room is hiring for pathfinders right now. So I think
well, Fred, right back at you. As you know, my wife, who's doing work with and as you said, I definitely married up, but she's back building a school in Burundi, inspired by you, and the whole network out of ALA and ALU has been her major source of talent and incredibly inspiring people. So these rings all come back around, and she wouldn't be doing what she's doing if it weren't for you. Now, sometimes I don't like that because she has to get up at 5 a.m. every morning to talk to Burundi, but
to talk to Burundi, yeah. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying is so incredibly true, and that's what we're trying to create here in the room. It's a community of people who are not only getting but also giving to each other, and really collaborating to amplify each other's impact, and ultimately creating a ripple effect of change across the continent because of shared values and collaboration to really drive impact. And I think what you're talking about is a great example of that. So I'd like to now go to some of the questions from the audience. We have a question here from Akshay, who's calling in from Kenya, who says, through all your experience, what's the biggest leadership lesson you've learned, especially when it comes to creating impact and empowering society?
Asha, it's a great question. You may not like my answer, which is the greatest lesson I've learned is that know yourself, listen and know yourself, because everybody has a different leadership style. And I've been blessed to work with some of the great leaders in the world. And the one thing I've sort of learned from watching is that you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to surround yourself with people who complement them. And if you're like me, that it's not hard, because I can find people who are so much more talented than I am, and then I just have to get out of the way and let them drive the work and the effort. But there's not one right leadership style. It really depends on who you are. Barack Obama had a very different leadership style than Bill Clinton. Hillary Clinton, who's actually probably the best manager I've ever worked for, the way she ran the State Department was incredible to watch, and her attention to detail. It really was amazing to watch how she led that organization. And she led by listening. I'll never forget my first day as ambassador in South Africa. She was coming to South Africa, so they rushed my confirmation through the Senate. And I got on a plane, and I met her on the runway in OR Tambo. And actually, while I was waiting for her to get off the plane, they were positioning her limousine, and they ran over my foot. That wasn't such a good start to my ambassadorial career. But and she was coming in, and we were going right into a meeting with President Zuma. And the staff had given me this big briefing book with all these points that she was supposed to make, and she was supposed to tell him this about Israel and this about trade, and they went down the list. And we walked into the room, and what I watched her do, which was such a profound lesson for me, was instead of giving the talking points, she asked questions. How do you think about this issue? And she really listened intently. And she, by the end of the conversation, had done a version of the talking points, but they were couched, or they were not couched, they were delivered in a way he could hear them, because she'd spent the time to understand where he was coming from. And it was a masterclass for me in how to listen first and then act, rather than jumping in and acting up front. There are other leaders who lead by the power of their speech. She was not as compelling a speech maker as her husband was, who could move a room just with his words. So there are different styles, and understanding what your style is and finding the right role for yourself, and having Jerry Maguires, to use Fred's, or ambassadors who can help you think about where you fit in the world as a leader, and will give you honest feedback about that, because not everybody's going to be on the stage. And as I've found in my career, the roles supporting leaders can be equally powerful.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. We have another question from Maya. Do you want to bring Maya up on the screen that she can ask a question? Maya Coulter.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Maya.
Yep, we can hear you,
great.
Maya.
So my question is, you've obviously navigated several global issues in your career, and I was just wondering what advice you can give to people who are up against daunting or seemingly daunting challenges in their careers or even lives.
That's a tough question. I think, um, first of all, uh, controlled failure is not a bad thing. You learn a lot. I actually, I ran for class president in high school and got beaten badly early in my career, and it made me realize, hey, maybe that's not the right type of role for me. And I think persistence, tenacity, fighting through those failures, but also learning from those failures about where you fit. Um, what are the key things that you can bring to the table that will help you move through them, and then finding allies, cultivating a network of people throughout your career who can help you get through those periods and will be your anchors. You know, uh, I watched President Obama, who got crushed running for Congress and then just picked himself up, took lessons from that, and became a rocket ship that took off. And so really don't let failure deter you, but learn from it and build and drive through those challenges. That would be the best way I could think of answering that. It's a tough question, though.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. And again, there you go, Don, talking about the importance of building that network around you to help cushion some of those difficult challenges. And again, something that we're trying to do here in the room. There's a comment in the chat from an old friend of yours, Shaka Sisuli. He says, "Hi Ambo, great chat. He'd like to reconnect." I'll send you his
Shaka,
email address afterwards.
give me an email. Look forward to connecting.
So we have
Thanks,
another
Ambo.
question
Great
from.
to see you. Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, he calls you Ambo. So here's another question from Nozipo, January Badil of Darling from South Africa. So maybe Nozipo, do you want to come up and ask a question?
Okay.
And I think Nozipo is also a former ambassador, isn't that correct? So ambassador to ambassador.
Thank you, Fred.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your very interesting contribution to this conversation. I've put my question there to ask if to just observe that there's a narrative that women played a significant role in supporting the Biden campaign that led to his success and to shift the focus from social movements to political participation through the vote. And do you think that Biden will employ more women in his cabinet, and Black women in particular, and to play a role in uniting the country?
Yeah, I think I know he will. He's very committed to that. If you look around the world and see who's handled, which global leaders have handled the pandemic well, it's almost 100% correlation with them being woman leaders. With Vice President Biden in particular, you watch the role that I think Kamala Harris will play as vice president, and how, for those of you who, one of the most striking things on the Saturday where President Biden gave his acceptance speech, he actually had the vice president elect speak before him and speak for a long time. That doesn't usually happen. That's usually the president's moment, but that was a true sign to me that President-elect Biden is really committed to having a vice president who's going to be his true partner in this role. And boy, did she, that was a really smart decision, because that was one of the most inspiring speeches ever. And I think you'll see him bringing women forward in leadership posts across the administration.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nazipo. Our next question is from Chris Rouse. Chris, do you want to come up and ask your question? Chris coming in from London.
Yeah. Hi, Don.
Hey, Chris.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for your great contribution. I had two. One quick one. Who continues to inspire you in your work as a husband and a father? And a little bolt onto this is, could you describe a significant in your life where you overcame adversity and how you came through it? What got you through that moment? Well, probably in your working life, I should add.
Great. Both very thoughtful questions. For those, I'm blessed to have had a father who served as an incredible role model for me about the type of father and husband I wanted to be. And really, that he's been my inspiration and continues to be about finding that balance. That same person I mentioned earlier, Wayne Meisel, who was my rival in high school. When he and I were about 30, we were sitting around one day trying to think about how do you lead a fulfilling life. And we sort of jointly, after a few beers, came up with what we called the 4 F's. Wayne has since gone on to be a minister and has added a 5th, which is faith. But the 4 F's are family, financial, fulfillment, and family, financial, fulfillment, and fun. Fun/friends, because they generally go together. And what it's not that profound an insight, but what we realized is no job, no pathway gives you all of those at the same time. So how do you balance those in the right proportions? And with your spouse, make that balancing act. And that's been a guide for me throughout my life and has really helped me decide on where I'm going to do certain things and where I'm not. On your second question, I was actually working for Vice President Gore, who's his domestic policy advisor. And we, Tipper Gore and he felt very strongly that, the level of violence on, at that time, games and in music was contributing to the epidemic of violence in the United States. So we decided we were going to demand ratings on all sorts of content. And I was sort of leading the charge on this effort. And the day we announced it, or the day after they announced it, I picked up the newspaper and the whole industry was attacking us and explaining how stupid we were and all the ways that we hadn't done this well or been thoughtful about it. It was a complete disaster. And I walked into my boss, who at that time, Vice President Gore's chief of staff was a guy by the name of Ron Klain, who was just appointed as Biden's chief of staff. And I walked into Ron's office and said, "Ron, I've totally screwed this up. I should resign." And Ron looked at me and he said, "Don, most jobs are," and for those of you, sorry, these are going to be American sports analogies, but most sports are like football. You don't ever want to fumble. You don't ever want to miss a tackle. Working in the White House is like baseball. Like a good hitter hits 300, everybody strikes out, people make errors. In the White House, that's just the level of the game you're playing at. And you're going to get some things wrong and you got to pick yourself up. And so I kept going in the job, but I learned some very profound lessons from that. Like, one, if you're going to make a challenging, in almost everything that great social entrepreneurs or innovators are working on is indeed challenging, you have to know all the stakeholders and you have to know where they're going to come from, and you have to do more homework than I did at that time to know what's going to come back at you. How do you prepare for it? how do you have responses, and are there ways to find some common ground? And if not, just be prepared to fight and know what you're going to get so that you're not caught by surprise. So took a lot of lessons from that, and Ron helped me sort of understand the depth of that challenge. So hopefully that's a good answer.
So we have one last question, which is going to come from Fatoumata Fatou, who I think you know, ALA alumni.
Yes.
She's living in Los Angeles now, building a company as an entrepreneur there. Can someone ask Fatou's question?
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to ask this question. Can you guys hear me fine?
You're looking great.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Fatou.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so my question is that I'm going to give the context. I'm starting to learn a lot about power and what happens when you are in a professional world, what happens when there's like a power imbalance, right? Whether it's with investors or whether it's with your CEO or something like that. And I am fascinated because I'm trying to understand and learn how it affects the exchange of ideas, right? Like whether you can have a free exchange of ideas when there's power imbalance. And of course, that's like a microcosm. And then I wonder, of course, you have seen how it affects countries when there is power imbalance. And so I'm just curious what you want to share about this and like how you have dealt with this. Thank you.
Yeah, and part of our goal at Skoll right now is to try and figure out how do you shift power. And we center equity at the core of our strategy, and as a donor, we recognize there's a power imbalance from day one, because people are coming to us to try and get money from us, so we have the power, and these are, but as you said so well, these power relationships run through everything, and you need to figure out how do you move people to give up that power, and the whether it's economic power, political power, each of these is challenging. And probably the greatest lessons I learned as ambassador in South Africa was Nelson Mandela had this incredible he knew he needed to shift power. Now, he cut a deal that still is being argued about in South Africa today, to say, I'm going to try and shift political power, and in order to do that peacefully, I'm willing to allow economic power to shift more slowly. But it was a very calculated, and you can argue whether it was right or wrong. I happen to think it was the right decision, but it was a very calculated decision. And he spent time understanding what were the motivations of everybody from his jailer to the president of South Africa, listening, understanding, thinking through to find where their heart was, where their weaknesses were. And, I think one of the lessons we're all still struggling through, I believe that each of us has like an angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other. None of us is a perfect human being. And how do you appeal to that angel? How do you bring out the angels in others so that they'll shift that power? President Trump has given us a master class in how to bring out the demons and how to stoke fear and drive people apart. And the challenge, I think, for anyone who wants to shift power is how do you appeal to that other side, and move people along that journey in the way that Mandela did with South Africa. It's a very tough question, but it's exactly the right one, because it's at the core of any social movement. How do you shift power? How do you tell a narrative that allows people to see the world, to see that new world where power is shifted in a way they see themselves in it? And And then how do you build up enough allies and a big enough network of support to drive that both narrative and that shift in power? You can't do it on your own. It's good to see you again.
Yes, it's very good to see you. Thank you. If I may ask for a follow-up, like, how did you do it early in your career? Like, I'm sure.
Sorry, Fatu. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up because Don has to leave at the top of the hour. So
I'll do that with you separately whenever you want.
Yeah. I know, Don, before you go, we've got a couple more minutes left with you. I know you've got another appointment. So we're going to do what we call the fire walk. In this session, I'm going to ask you to respond to a few questions in less than 7 words. And we'll do it very rapid so you can get to your next appointment.
Okay.
All right. So again, in less than 7 words, and we're going to do this very quickly so you can leave on time. Complete this sentence. Being U.S. ambassador to South Africa was
a true gift to see the world through somebody else's eyes.
Wonderful. Proudest career moment.
Watching President Obama give the speech at Grant Park on election night.
Great. Favorite moment with President Obama.
The day before he was inaugurated, we were, I got to do this in 7 words. Watching my sons play basketball with him the day before inauguration.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. If you were running for office, what would your campaign slogan be?
I'll never run for office.
Okay. Describe Africa in 6 words or less.
Huge potential, huge challenges.
Excellent. Name 3 things you wouldn't be able to do without your wife, Liz.
My whole career wouldn't be the same without her. And we wouldn't have this incredible 3 sons. That's 2.
Okay. What's one thing on your bucket list?
Going to Israel.
Okay. Name something you tried to do that you knew you would be bad at.
Singing. Did a talent show.
Okay. If you could choose your own nickname, what would it be?
It was the Gipper.
The Gipper, all right. Most rewarding advice you've ever received?
Listen first.
Listen first, excellent. America's greatest threat?
The disunity we're facing as a country.
The last item you purchased?
An Ethernet dongle for my computer.
What challenges you the most?
My wife.
All right. Second last question. What would you do if you didn't have to work tomorrow?
Go for a hike on a beautiful mountain or the ocean.
All right. Final one. In 2025, we will look back at 2020 and say?
It was the most challenging year the world has faced in my lifetime.
Wonderful. Don, thank you so much for joining us on this, really, really engaging conversation. And thank you for all that you've done for me personally, as I was one of my pathfinders, and for all the social entrepreneurs that you're currently supporting through the Skoll Foundation. Thank you for joining us, and wish you all the best for the rest of your day.
Thank you, and thank you all for listening. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Thank you, Don. Bye. And so for those of you who are on Zoom, please stay with us. We're going to engage very shortly once Don leaves in a brief discussion for about 15-20 minutes, just to reflect on some of the wisdom that Don shared with us. So, but Don, you're free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on YouTube today. Do tune in next time and be sure to like and subscribe the Pathways channel. For our members who've joined us on Zoom, do stay on the call for more conversations